Welcome to the Weekly Wars podcast, where two guys who talk about Star Wars way too much have decided to record it and let you listen. Be sure to check every Wednesday to get the latest episode. And now to Zach and Rhett.
Welcome to Weekly Wars, your weekly dose of all things Star Wars.
My name is Rhett.
I'm Zach, and Rhett finally let me do the opening after 16 episodes.
Never again.
Whatever, it was amazing.
You wish.
Best opening we've ever had. Whatever, I hate you so bad.
So this week we are going to do the other half of our lightsaber fight review for Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith.
And conveniently, it's our lightsaber review part 3 as well. Dun dun dun.
Too much of a kawinky-dink.
We end up talking about these lightsaber fights way too much, apparently. So
I guess.
It takes us a long time to get through it.
Way longer than it should, but there's a lot to go over, okay?
There is. We have a lot of emotion tied to these lightsaber fights, either passionate hatred or glowing love.
Yeah, mixture of both, I guess. A little bit of either.
We're so far away from my personal favorite lightsaber fight, though.
I know.
So far away.
No, it's freaking crazy.
Although there is a close second now with the end of season 2 of Rebels.
Yeah, there is.
I don't know.
If we did this chronologically, we could address that one pretty quick. I should
technically
say
we already passed it.
Star Wars chronologically.
No, we didn't. Yeah, it would be between episodes 3 and 4, huh? Sorry.
Have you even seen the show?
My brain
I'm
was
incredulous.
My brain was on Clone Wars.
Oh, okay. Well,
not
that's true.
Rebels, but it was from Rebels, so it's between 3 and 4.
Yeah, I guess after this one, we'll figure out how we want to tackle the next series of fights, because we could go into animated, or we could just finish up with the movies and then get into the animated stuff afterwards. Anyway,
We'll fight about it later. Maybe our next one will be our favorites from fan films.
Ooh.
I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know if my knowledge of fan films is as much as I'd like it to be for that,
but just Darth Maul.
That's true.
Would be good to talk about.
Yes, but we also need to just review that one as well.
That's true. Okay.
So
we better get into this, or else we're never gonna get done. Because we're talking about 3 lightsaber fights, and I think we only talked about 2 last time, apparently.
But they were very large fights, so I think that's okay.
There's a lot to dissect, apparently. Okay, so where we dropped off last time was Obi-Wan Kenobi versus General Grievous in Episode 3. So now we are continuing onto the next lightsaber fight from that film.
Which is when Mace Windu takes the couple other members of the Jedi Council to confront Chancellor Palpatine.
He's not Chancellor Palpatine anymore. He's Darth Sidious.
He's still Chancellor Palpatine, though.
No, Chancellor Palpatine was never real.
Sheev Palpatine is a real person, sir. Sheev Palpatine from Naboo.
Prove it.
Obviously.
Prove it. Prove it using the expanded universe canon.
Darth Plagueis.
Is that expanded universe canon?
Yeah.
No.
According to legends. He is Naboovian or Nabooian or Nubian. Nubian?
No, it's not Nubian.
But they call that one ship in Phantom Menace. So you say it's a
Nubian?
Yeah.
He does say that. Maybe you're right. That's terrible.
No. Now I feel under-researched.
Well, all this time we've talked about the Emperor and you fail when it matters.
Whatever. Just because I'm not up to date on appropriate pronouns to
I've been playing
describe.
World of Warcraft, so all I can think is Nerubian, the little spider race people.
Don't even
animal thing.
mention another fandom on this podcast again.
Wow, this got serious. Well, while you Google that, I'm going to go ahead and start talking about this fight, if that's okay. So just a reminder to everyone, we evaluate all these fights on 3 measures. The first is the relevance to the story, because we think story is very important. One is choreography and how well the choreography is. And then the last is the emotion of the fight. And we don't necessarily talk about them in that order, but those are the 3 things that we discuss. And how well it has an emotional tie, whether it's relevant to the plot, and did you find it?
Yeah,
And
it is
choreography.
J-Type 327 Nubian, made by Nubia Star Drives Incorporated.
Oh, so it's well, that doesn't necessarily mean Naboo, because it could just be the company.
I guess
that it's
Nubia.
canon anyway.
Well, the starship is canon. You freaking punk. Oh yeah, Nubia is a completely different system. So, whatever. Anyways.
So the 3 Jedi Masters, and Mace Windu all go to confront Darth Sidious.
So yeah, in terms of plot significance, I mean
it actually matters.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
How we get there is kind of random and
and
weird.
It shows
and
just like the complete lack of understanding of the character of Anakin. Because
Right.
Anakin's like, oh, he's a bad guy. Wait, I'm going to follow you now because maybe he's not a bad guy? I don't know.
Or like he goes and helps the Jedi who go to confront him, and then he goes after him anyways, and then ends up turning against the Jedi.
Yeah.
Like I'm just like,
he's like,
what?
He's like, oh, I should go help them because it's going to be tough. And then he shows up and he's like, maybe I don't want to really.
Right. He's like, it's supposed to be conflicted, but it just comes off as flip-floppy, not conflicted.
Just confused.
Yeah.
But the idea behind it is fairly significant, right?
That's
it's
supposed
like,
to be the final trigger for him to turn to the dark side, essentially.
Right. And from a plot point on the villain's perspective, I think it's a fantastic moment because this is literally the culmination of Sheev Palpatine's machinations. Like, this is the point. Like, if you look at it, I guess, removed from the movie, this is a very pivotal moment because he has designed that as the time at which Anakin will betray the Jedi Order. He sets it up so it looks like Mace Windu and the Jedi Council are actually trying to overthrow him as Chancellor. Like, that's what it looks like that's what they're trying to portray for Anakin's perspective, and it doesn't come off all that great, but that's the intent behind it, right? So he's coming.
Well, and honestly, I
that.
think Palpatine waited till Yoda was somewhere else before he did that.
Right. If Yoda had been there at that time, it would have been a completely different scenario.
Yeah, I think it would have gone differently to begin with.
Well, and I'm sure I don't know. I think the feelings that Anakin would have towards Yoda and seeing Yoda in that position of like confronting the Chancellor. If Yoda had even decided to do that, he might not have decided to do that at that time.
He probably, yeah. Especially surrounded with masters, Yoda would have probably protected those masters.
Right.
If Sidious had leapt out like he did, Yoda would have protected them first.
Right. So yeah, if Yoda had been there, and if Yoda had even had the same thought process that Mace Windu did, it probably would have been a completely different scenario. But Palpatine orchestrated it so that Yoda is elsewhere, Obi-Wan's elsewhere. The only one who's there is Mace Windu, who, as we've mentioned before, is the physical embodiment of the arrogance of the Jedi Order.
And also, as we've talked about before, he feeds off of the dark side.
Right. He is the one most prone to anger or fear in this case. He
uses it to fuel his lightsaber fighting.
So I think, too, that it was Windu acting out of fear when he hears the Sith Lord is the Chancellor of the Republic. He's probably afraid of the implications, so he just runs off to confront it. Letting fear guide his actions. Yoda could have been much more reserved and removed emotionally from that situation. So it's a very pivotal plot point that just didn't come off the way that it should have, especially when they just get cut down like they mean nothing.
Well, so, and in terms of the choreography, that was so terrible that you literally don't remember the rest of the choreography. Like, you kind of feel that way because that happens and you're all like, what? That was the dumbest thing I've seen.
Yeah,
and you're trying to process it, and then the fight's over. And you're like, oh, now they're standing by the window. Okay, well, the scene's continuing. I guess there was a fight.
Well, and from a choreographer's perspective, like, you do want a way to take out those three guys at once, right? Like, you have to remove them to simplify the fight, because having 4 against 1 would be really hard to do with any type of stunt team, right? And they also picked a pretty poor location because there's, like, no open spaces. So from that perspective, it's like, you got to take those 3 out, but the way they decided to do it, which I think we covered this in our How to Fix the Prequels a little bit.
Yeah, probably.
But there's just so many other ways that they could have taken those 3 Jedi Masters out that would make more sense and have been cooler.
Right, make Sidious powerful. Like, even have him pull... I know this didn't really exist, the whole Force stun thing. I mean, it existed, but it wasn't in the movie verse that Kylo Ren does to people. Right. But have him do that and have the Master struggling against it, and then you can have Mace Windu fight it off.
Right.
You know, that way it at least appears that they're not completely incompetent.
Yeah, or I still like the idea that we brought up in that prequel podcast about the Darth Nihilus, like, necromantic energy draw.
Sucking all their power.
Because that's a technique they might not have seen for thousands of years at that point.
And
like, it would have been completely out of their purview. So if he had busted that out, it's like they don't have a defense. They're not used to that. Mace might have been the only one to survive because of his connection to the dark side. I mean, not that was explicit in movie canon either, but anyways. So as far as the initial choreography, I think that detracts greatly from everything else that comes after.
It really does.
It drops because, like you said, you can't even think about what happens.
Breaking the window, too, like, your mind is still numb from what happened before that. And he breaks the window, and you're all like, did you just break that to be cool?
Well, and
like, that's what
do
it
they not
looks
have
like.
Safety glass in Star Wars?
Right, or like
if
and
you
it
had
shatters. Like, why didn't his laser sword just
blows out?
I mean, I don't know. It doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense. It would make sense that the air pressure would suck it out, I guess, but surely it would be extremely strong. Like, what is it they have in Star Trek? I'm mentioning another fandom.
Oh my goodness!
Invisible. It's not like titanium or steel. I can't remember what the ship's made out of. Is it invisible aluminum or something like that?
Is it called invisible aluminum?
That's what they have for the windows inside
like the porthole specifically.
Right. So when you're looking out, it's still covered or whatever. He mentions it.
They
in
have
contact,
that. It's freaking plasteel. Like, that's what, or transparasteel is what I mean. Because plasteel is like the plastic, but transparasteel is supposed to be metal-like transparent substance. Like, that's what they put on starships.
Right. How is it that that's not there? And this is the Chancellor's chamber, so it's not like it's just a random home, right? It's like...
He'd have bulletproof glass, lightsaber-proof glass.
Padme's temporary living, where they had to cut the glass and send the worms in, was apparently more secure glass than what they had.
Right. Because it didn't just explode out the minute that it fractured.
Right.
Anyway, yeah, so... The choreography for the whole thing is just... I mean, Mace versus Palpatine in itself isn't the worst, right? It's fairly standard. It maybe suffers just a little bit because of the physical abilities of the actors, but I don't think that's anything to like completely denounce it on. I do think the first 5 seconds of that completely denounces the rest of it.
Yeah.
Especially when you compare it to the Clone Wars and Kit Fisto can take on Grievous by himself, and then he dies in 2 seconds against freaking Palpatine.
Can't even block base. Oh, no. Wait, Kit Fisto does get like 2 blocks, doesn't he? And then he goes
survives
down.
Slightly longer than
longer, right?
else.
Yeah, that's right. He does slightly better.
Yeah, and they don't show a whole lot of Eth Koth, but he's still a master.
Right.
Like, there's no way.
And I think we all understand the purpose. Everyone I've talked to, we understand the purpose was to make Palpatine seem like he was just incredibly powerful. But it didn't look like that. It looked like they were dumb.
Yeah, it looked like they were pansies. Like, if they had been powerful and still defeated, Palpatine is that much more powerful. But it's more like, oh, these guys are barely better than Padawans. I mean, they're Jedi Masters who've been fighting the Clone Wars for the last almost decade. Right. And they still can't put up a fight. So...
Oh, gosh.
Why?
Why? So, in terms of plot, I will give it a 5 out of 5 because it is absolutely relevant. It's what precedes it and what happens because of it that I don't think makes a lot of sense. But in and of itself, it is a main story point. So it's not a lightsaber fight for just the sake of a lightsaber fight. It totally has reason.
So I would say on the villain side, it's a 5 out of 5. I think the way it's presented, it's more like a 3 out of 5 or a 2 out of 5. Yeah. Just the way, like it's almost overshadowed by how terrible some of it is.
It's like, true.
And so I think that drops it significantly.
Maybe. I guess it does impact it. I don't know.
Well, because
the choreography just ruins it. It so does.
But even then, just the way that it happens, like so quickly, it's just presented so.
Mace Windu literally just died, and Anakin's like, "What have I done? Oh, I'm evil. Okay, let's be evil." And you're all like, let him suffer with it a little bit, like soak in his decision, and then have Palpatine say, "Hey, I can bring you out of this."
Right. It's not like, oh, you just murdered that Jedi Master. You might as well be Darth Vader. Okay, I guess. I don't see why not.
That's not manipulation. That's just like using the Force to force him to do what he wants or something.
Yeah. Or if he had reached that decision before he decided to attack Windu. Like if there had been that moment where like...
He's like, no, the Jedi are evil. I get it now.
Yeah, because up until the moment after he attacks... It's like...
Because the Jedi are corrupt at this point. And we understand that from the Clone Wars. We get hints of it in the movies.
So, the moment that he attacked should have been the moment where he's like, they're evil. Not afterwards, after Palpatine still has convincing to do. Like, he doesn't have that moment until essentially Mustafar. Like, he goes and takes out the Confederate leaders and Obi-Wan shows up, which we can get into later. Anyways, so yeah, he doesn't have that revelation till later. At that moment he's still like, well, I don't know what the right thing to do was. And then Palpatine's like, well, you're Vader now.
You are now Darth Vader.
And he's like, okay, sure, I'll go murder people.
What is it he says in Red Letter Media? He's like, and then he knelt down and it's like the Graveyard Smash. He knelt down before the Monster Mash and pledged allegiance to the Graveyard Smash. That's what it is.
Oh man, yeah, it's just so weird that I don't know. It should have been a little more decisive, I guess. What his process was, his thought process, and his character arc. Rather than just kind of like, he just kind of like fumbled into being Vader. It wasn't necessarily like a choice until after he'd already done it.
And everyone's talked about this, of course, but because Obi-Wan his description of what happened to Anakin doesn't seem to quite match up what we experience in the films. I think George Lucas tried to put it in there, or he tried to show elements of it, but it didn't work.
Right.
He didn't feel seduced by the dark side. It was more like a switch. Anyways. But.
So, as far as the emotional impact,
I laughed when he knelt down and said the first time I saw it, I laughed when he's all like, yes, I pledge. And I was like, what just happened?
Mace Windu dying made me really sad.
Oh, wow. Well, he might
7
not
out
be...
of 5 for her emotional impact.
7 out of 5
because of Mace Windu.
Wow.
Because even though he is the arrogant Jedi Order, he's still one of my favorites.
So, okay. For emotional impact, I'm giving it a 1 out of 5 because I don't think it works.
You have no heart.
I have no heart. And then choreography, I'm giving it a 0 out of 5 just because that stuff was so bad, the rest doesn't matter.
I'll give it a 0.5 just because Mace Windu's able to recover and fight him off by himself.
0.5 out of 5.
Which makes...
That gives it an average of a 0.25 out of 5 between us. So.
Well, I just like in tier of power of the Jedi or all Force users that you see in the movies, it's basically every other Jedi Master and Jedi Knight and Padawan that you see are all on the same level. And then there's Obi-Wan, Windu, Yoda, and Anakin and Palpatine, right? Like, no one else can even come close. Like, even Qui-Gon doesn't register on that upper echelon.
Right.
Because him and Maul both get killed off. Like, everyone is just up there.
These are the elite.
Yeah. Those main characters. Like, no one can even get close to that. They're all just... whatever.
Well,
anyways.
Speaking of that, that's our next fights after that happens, and
literally the most powerful people in the universe
at
duking
that
it
time
out.
decide to fight.
Yeah.
Which made me sad on the one. So Yoda versus Palpatine. Yoda and Obi-Wan split off, and Yoda goes to face off with the Emperor, and Obi-Wan goes to face off with Anakin. And Yoda, I just thought his introductions for his fights are just like the best.
It's true.
Like in episode 2 when he comes in on the cane, and you're just like, oh man, he's totally coming. I don't know what's gonna happen, and I was so happy. And then in this, he comes in and
chucks him against the wall.
Yeah, just chucks him. Both me and Rhett made the hand motion. Just knocks the Imperial guards out instantly.
It is insanely epic. Like, I mean, those guys had no chance. Like, and he does it so expertly. Like, it's such a small movement, and they barely move. It's like, to me, it feels like the Force equivalent of Bruce Lee's 1-inch punch. Like, that's basically
pretty much what it is.
And done. And oh man, so
and he just sits there too, like, okay, hey, and doesn't he call him Emperor too? He's
your reign is at an end, or he's come to end his reign, and not short enough it was, or something like that. I wanted to say tangentially real quick that I love when they replicated that with Sidious going to take out Maul and Savage on Mandalore.
In Clone Wars.
Like, when they did that, it was like Sidious doing the dark side version of that is pretty freaking awesome.
Yes, it is. That fight. We'll get it. We're going to talk about that one in our review.
Its own
so
episode.
Yes, definitely. That fight is amazing. We'll have to get into that, but yeah. So and people don't like Yoda's fighting. I love it. I think that's what he's talking about. When the Force is your ally, it doesn't matter how big you are. That's what he's saying, right? Because people are like, well, apparently size does matter because he has to use the Force to fight. No, that's the point. With the Force, it really doesn't matter.
Right. Well, so in terms of plot for... Well, I don't even know if I'd classify this as plot so much as just characters. But the Yoda versus Palpatine fight, I think, really defines Yoda's attitude. The end of the Clone Wars, I think, sets it up. When Yoda confronts Palpatine, that's like the nail in the coffin on Yoda's attitude of using a lightsaber, right?
Right.
That's why he doesn't have one on Dagobah. he completely renounces it because that moment after he has to run away from Palpatine, he realizes how futile that is. And that's when he becomes supreme Jedi hermit in the wilderness.
I'm just going to bring up this discussion we always have about this weapon is your life. And just say that you argued for me just now, and let's move on.
No. What I'm saying is from Yoda's point of view, it makes sense.
Oh, okay.
I'm still 100% behind Obi-Wan's point of view.
Wow.
Because they represent two sides of the same coin, right? One is the removal from everyday happenings and removal from violence. The other is using that as a cause to crusade with, and being involved, which may require violence.
Regardless, they were both wrong because Luke went and didn't die and ended up saving the galaxy.
Luke did both, so he won.
Yeah, pretty much. Good call. Anyways, so let's say in terms of overall plot relevance, this is hugely relevant because it sets up what happens to Yoda. It sets up his character. Now, I think the way he lost the fight, and we talked about this and how we changed the prequels a lot, was kind of dumb. And he's just like, oh, I guess I lose, and he runs away. And it's like, this is the most important battle in the galaxy, like in the last 1,000 years or more.
Right.
Like, and that long, this is the most important battle. And you're just like, now, when you see the Clone Wars, it makes a little more sense because he actually has an understanding that the Jedi are going to fall. And I think on his mind then is, I need to get out of here so that the Jedi can carry on so that we can do something later. I obviously can't do it on my own.
Yep. So definitely the plot significance in terms of how it's going to relate to the original trilogy, and the movie in and of itself is fairly large.
Yeah, it's not a nothing fight by far. They do a really good job. I just wish it had ended differently. Yeah,
I wish that it had been something a little more than just like fighting on the Senate floor. I mean, they started in the office, I guess, but
I was hoping that fight was going to take place in the Jedi Temple.
I think there could have been a much more thematically appropriate area. I guess to a certain extent, it's okay that it took place in the Senate chamber because that's like the very seat of the Republic, like the heart of the Republic, and Palpatine is actually using the heart of the Republic to try and crush the Jedi.
Yeah.
But it's like
there's some obvious symbolism.
Right, but it just would have looked a lot cooler somewhere else, like a sunset in the background on the Jedi Temple or something, There's
and after the Jedi Temple has been taken out, mostly,
right,
and Anakin's off, so Yoda comes back and could restore some order to the temple, and Palpatine's like, nope, let's go clean house.
Yeah.
We're not giving him a chance to recover. And then I don't know, it would have been awesome.
Right. Well, so
in the heart instead of the heart of the Republic, the heart of the Jedi, let's eradicate them. But it's okay.
Yeah, that's straying more into the what would we change rather than
whatever
actually reviewing. But yeah, so
tangents.
I would say with the idea of the plot, though, it is just so bizarre to me that they decide that Yoda and Obi-Wan decide to split up. Like, if they had left that as is, it seems like it'd make so much more sense for them to be like, let Anakin do his thing. He's gonna have to come back to Coruscant eventually, anyways. If they go and take out the Emperor together, they could confront Anakin together. Like, if they had worked in tandem, then it just seems like it would have made so much more sense to, like,
fight together.
Yeah, let's take out the Emperor. Once the Emperor's done, we can focus on Anakin without the Emperor's influence.
I mean, I don't know if they knew what Anakin was doing. They knew he was... Well, Obi-Wan goes and finds out he's going to Mustafar, but they don't know what he's doing. They know what the Emperor's doing, though.
Yeah.
And they both are there, so, yeah. There's not a lot of... intrinsic sense, I should say, as
right.
to what
well,
they're
and,
doing.
Yeah, and if you're looking at it in terms of plot, like, I mean, at that point, what is the plot, right? The plot is Anakin falling, so that was why they had to send Obi-Wan after Anakin for just that reason. Like, that's the only reason. Like, there's no logic to it.
They're both the fights, and I think this goes to what we're talking about. And what's funny, maybe we should just sort of talk about both fights a little bit, because they do happen at the same time. We can evaluate them separately, but there are some connections here that are relevant to discuss. Both of them have overarching connections, right? Obviously, yeah. Anakin is gonna become Darth Vader. Spoiler alert.
Wait, what?
I mean, and they have to set that up. I think the actual process of getting there is extremely forced. It doesn't make any sense. It's like,
which is an issue with doing a prequel in general.
Yeah,
like.
It's true.
But yes, it is. They have to make him be evil. Like, they had to make him be evil to make it fit with Vader.
But I think killing the kids was much worse than killing the frickin' Nemoidians.
Right. He did go and end the war. Like, it was a bad way to do it, and definitely an evil way to do it. But that at least wasn't murdering innocent children.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so let's give our points for Yoda versus Palpatine before we get hardcore into Obi-Wan versus Anakin. So an overarching plot for Yoda versus Palpatine, I will give it a 5, only because of the Clone Wars. Without the Clone Wars, I would give it a lesser score. The Clone Wars cartoon.
I think I'm gonna rate that one lower again, just because I feel like the plot got lost in the characters at that moment. Like, the plot just kind of gave way to the characters and the plot of the future, the Star Wars, the future of the Star Wars timeline, more so than what was actually happening at the time.
In the moment.
It's like they had to explain away the future. And so because of that, I feel like the actual storyline, what could have made the very impactful literal battle for the freedom of the galaxy and the Jedi Order's fall, just kind of took away that punch. So I'm going to give it like a 3.
The choreography was fine. It wasn't like amazing or anything. We'd seen Yoda do his stuff before. I think the setup for the fight was awesome. Location was okay, but the choreography, it was just okay. It wasn't anything that blew my mind.
Yeah, their actual lightsaber to lightsaber fighting was relatively sparse. And it is interesting because it's like both of their styles are so similar. They're both really old guys who use the Force to fuel acrobatics.
Right.
So, essentially both Ataru-based users.
That was so nerdy.
Deal with it. And they didn't do that a whole lot, which I kind of get why. I mean, it would have been kind of a crazy CGI thing, a lot of stuff trying to work out with these two old guys flying around, but yeah, it's I guess not what I wanted from the final battle between two of the most powerful Force users that ever lived.
I was expecting like the city to be destroyed.
Right. It should have been Man of Steel level destruction. Not necessarily, but the even the Yoda versus Dooku fight had a little more like contest of wills than this, which was essentially Palpatine throwing stuff.
He was throwing stuff at him, literally throwing stuff at him.
Like, there could have been more going on with that, and it would have been cool too to have been like a mind battle, I think. But
well, especially with George Lucas, who said, "I can literally do anything I want now. Pretty much, I just say it and it happens," and that's what you come up with.
Yeah, should have been more. So for choreography, I'll give it a 1.
And then in terms of emotion, I was pretty mad when Yoda ran away. So I did have emotion. I just don't think it was the emotion they wanted.
Yeah, it's one of those that like the anticipation of it was so high that the result and the culmination was kind of let down, and it's like, oh well.
Yep. So I don't know.
Anyway, so yeah, we can go on to Obi-Wan versus Anakin, which is arguably one of the most important lightsaber fights in Star Wars history.
This is like, speaking of opposites, the opening to this fight is the dumbest dialogue. Like, Yoda comes in and is this awesome little green dude, takes out a guy and is like, I'm ready to fight, man. We're fighting for the galaxy.
Right.
And Obi-Wan and Anakin have this dialogue that's just like, what do you...
They're both being little brats.
That doesn't even make sense. Only a Sith deals in absolutes. Yeah, that was an absolute, Obi-Wan. Literally.
And the stuff with Padme before, too, is pretty
You're
terrible.
breaking my heart.
You're going down a path like, get up, follow.
You already followed him. You literally have. When he murdered all of the desert people, you were like, oh, it's okay. It's okay to be angry.
You're allowed to do that. That's fine. Yeah, so I think that the build up to it is a little silly. But plot wise, I do find it pretty significant. I do think it's a much more important fight than Yoda versus Palpatine in terms of like the plot of the movie, right? It's one of those where you could have reduced the Yoda Palpatine fight by a significant margin, and it still would have been fine. And you could have reduced the time frame of the Obi-Wan versus Anakin fight by a lot, and it would have been okay. But that fight still had to happen until completion.
Right. Technically, Yoda didn't have to fight Palpatine.
Yeah, they could have left that out, and the idea of Anakin falling would have still happened. But it's definitely, I don't know, like, I guess one of the good things that came out of this is that you needed Anakin and Obi-Wan to fight in order for Anakin to truly fall. Like, obviously the slaying of the younglings was a pretty big fallen moment, and that probably should have come after this fight.
Probably.
If that had been post Obi-Wan, that would have been like it was a pretty fast
twist. Like it. Well, even though I believe he was pretty much evil all through episode 2 and 3, but from what they were trying to present, at least, it seemed like he just like flipped a switch and like, now I'm a horrible murdering scumbag.
I even going so far as to hurt my wife and unborn children.
Right.
Just because
I love you. I love you so much I'm going to kill you. Wait, I thought I was doing all this to save you, but now I'm choking you to death? What's going on? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Stupid
scene. But yeah, like the fight had to have happened in order for that fall, right? And I do want to mention briefly, and maybe we can even link this in the details of the video in the podcast. There is a video where someone went in and re-edited some of the footage from A New Hope and Revenge of the Sith, basically splicing in shots of Anakin and Obi-Wan's fight with Obi-Wan's dialogue to Luke about how good of a person Anakin was. And I find that a very moving piece of fan film edit. Like, it is just powerful.
It is really good.
And it really does show, like, how Obi-Wan's perspective can make sense, right? Like, despite everything else, it's like the way that they put that together was just pretty fantastic. And that's I guess one of those things, maybe it's biased me a little bit towards the plot and even the emotional impact of the fight, but that made the significance of it all so much more important to me after I saw it. So for plot significance, I give this one, I'm going to say a 4 out of 5 on it.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. 4 out of 5, I think, is good. And it's very significant to the overarching plot, obviously.
Right.
Plot,
the story of the Skywalkers, it's vastly important. To the story of the movie, it's vastly important. Like, just pretty solid.
It's pretty good. It's up there. The choreography, I think, was okay. There were some weird moments. I do think it was a little long.
I would say the length of it is the biggest downside.
And they tried to go too big with some things. We're going to skate through the lava and fight each other and stuff like that.
This is almost the exact opposite of the
Yoda thing.
Yeah, it's like they should have chose
We're
a
hypocrites.
simpler...
People are going to call us hypocrites on the internet.
Flip-floppers, wafflers, going back and forth, can't make up their minds.
But the thing is, Palpatine and Yoda was not as personal. And this is much more personal. It's
personal, and they made it super grandiose in location.
Yeah.
I mean, like, and I don't feel like there's symbolism to that location necessarily. Like, it was there just so that Anakin could get burned alive. Not necessarily for, like, symbolism or relevance. Like,
right.
It was just a location.
If they wanted it to mean something, they could have had it be on Tatooine where his mother died, and Obi-Wan's like, I know where he's at.
Right.
Like, something like that.
Well, yeah, and you can have lava anywhere. Like, they could have put lava wherever, and it didn't even have to be lava, like space fire. Anyway, I don't know. It's just there's tons of stuff. Fire. Yeah. There's tons of stuff that they could have done to make that a little different. But I do think some of the choreography is pretty fun. I will say that one of the biggest things that, I mean, I've even made fun of it in the past with this fight, is the unnecessary flourishes, because they have moments where, like, they're sitting there and they're, like, twirling right next to each other.
Yeah.
I will mention that it may not be the most cinematic or necessarily, like, cool or relevant looking thing, but that can happen in actual sword fighting. Like, you can have moments where, like, you think you're gonna cut somewhere, and then, like, maybe you change your mind, maybe you miss, maybe they step back and they void out of the way. And so, like, you don't want to stop the momentum, so maybe you just kind of do that. And I don't think it's, like, a martially stupid thing to do either. But it does look kind of funny, because they're just...
It does look funny.
Obviously the most egregious example being egregious, not egregious, but egregious example. They're, like, literally a foot apart, just
twirling the blades for, like, 3 seconds, and you're just like, what is even happening?
Yeah. So, like, I would have to say, as, like, it would and could happen, but for a movie fight, it's not necessarily something you should show, just because movie fights should be a little more, unless you have a very good reason, unless it's like
they're
a
a little more
thing.
cinematic.
Yeah.
Right.
So for this climactic battle, it shouldn't have happened, I don't think. But I do really like the when they force push against each other. I thought that was super cool.
That's cool. It was sort of a different thing that we haven't seen really with the Force as much. Sort of like who's stronger, and they both lose. I did think that it ended kind of weird. I loved the moment that Obi-Wan has at the end, and I think Ewan McGregor nailed that, after he's cut off his legs and arms.
Absolutely, yeah.
But that moment when he's like, I have the higher ground, and you're all like, even in this fight alone, how many times have you or him had the higher ground and not been able to do anything?
So, yeah.
Just in this fight. Like, not even mentioning every other fight they've been in.
Yeah, there's a moment earlier when Anakin had the higher ground, and that didn't mean anything. It's like, it would have made sense if a lot of the choreography for all of the prequels had been a little more grounded, because having the high ground might have actually meant something. But Obi-Wan and Phantom Menace, Obi-Wan and...
Right, literally, Obi-Wan of all people.
Yeah, he's constantly flipping over. He flips over Maul a couple of times.
Yeah.
Like, and so for him to say that at that moment was kind of like, it doesn't jive with what we've seen for the last 3 movies.
No. And I understand what he was going for. It was the arrogance of Anakin that brought about his downfall.
Right.
And that's fine, except this was the wrong way to do it.
Well, yeah, and even from a realistic standpoint, he had a tactically more desirable position, but they just have set it up before that they've been able to flip over each other without any consequence.
Right,
Like,
it hasn't
They
mattered.
rolled really well on their acrobatics checks, so you can't make an attack of opportunity on them, except for this one time.
Right.
So that is kind of funny.
So, yeah. So I'll give the choreography like a 2 to 3 out of 5. There's some cool moments. There's some dumb stuff.
I'll give it a 3.5. Just because
With an accent.
3 and 9 hype. I do think that there are some things that I thought were silly before that aren't as silly now. I think it could have been a pretty solid 5 if they'd cut it in half.
Yeah, I think so. If they toned it down, trimmed it, didn't make it so grandiose for these two.
Yeah.
And even have them banter about, I remember when you taught me that, you think that's going to work or something like that. Or like, I taught you that,
Well,
that
yeah.
type of thing.
Stuff that could have been a build up to Vader's line.
When
Where he's
we
like,
last, yeah.
when I left you, I was but a learner. Now I'm the
I'm the
master.
master.
Which is another line that doesn't really jive with, because he didn't. Obi-Wan left him. He didn't leave Obi-Wan.
That's true.
But anyway, yeah, like that line could have had more significance if at that point Obi-Wan was like, "You're still the learner, right?"
Right.
And he said something to that effect.
The
it would
reason
have
you
been,
never became a master is because you never learned.
right?
Something like that.
Yeah, make him say something that's like, Anakin's still a learner. So when Anakin has 20 years to grow in the dark side, he's like, now I'm the master, even though he wasn't.
In terms of emotion, I'm going to give it a 2.5 out of 5. I'm sort of, some of it was awesome, some of it was ridiculously bad. So,
since I'm not counting that intro scene, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5.
wow.
Because I don't think that intro scene should necessarily
Fine.
count because of personal bias.
Because I don't want it to.
But yeah, I think, like you said, I think the stuff at the end with Obi-Wan as
You're
he's
my
leaving.
brother.
Right, like that to
loved
me,
you.
like freaking, it gets me right in the heartstrings. And again, with that edit, the fan edit of the dialogue, that's just one of my favorites. Also, I give it a slight boost for the "you have done that yourself," because that's probably
You
one
have
of the
done
best,
that yourself.
That's probably one of the best lines that's ever been uttered.
Oft repeated. Well, and the memes that have come out of this fight, like you're coming to work, right? When Emperor comes to pick up Vader's body, but you're still coming to work, right?
It's pretty classic.
Or like Anakin just burning in lava and everyone talking about what it's like when I have 5 kids at home or stuff like that,
Yeah, there's some good stuff that came from it. And yes, definitely in my daily life, I oft quote Obi-Wan and tell everyone, "You have done that yourself."
You have done that yourself.
Well,
There you go. We made it through the prequel movies.
So it's a pretty solid thing. And now we have finally made it to our 3rd episode of Lightsaber Reviews.
Woohoo! We'll figure out how we're going to proceed going forward. So I don't know what the next set of lightsaber fights we're going to do, but in a few episodes, expect us to do more lightsaber talk.
Something.
Yay!
The mystery just makes it all the more exciting.
Alrighty, thanks for joining us this week, and be sure to come back next week for another exciting Weekly Wars episode.
And may the Force be ever in your favor.